Good morning and welcome to the class. Today we are going to start with a new chapter which is called as the reproductive health. See, in our last few classes, we have learned about the human reproductive system. Yeah, when we were reading, we thought that it is quite complicated. We thought that there is involvement of so many hormones, so many types of cells, and a completely different process that's involved in the development of the fetus. Frankly speaking, this happens automatically without us even knowing of the changes inside the cell system or the hormonal system or whatever. However, one thing that we need to take care is about some of the health concerns that are involved with the system. And in this particular chapter, which is called as the reproductive health, we are going to discuss and understand about basically the basic processes of how to maintain the health of these reproductive systems, how we can watch closely to some of the important changes that would happen in these systems, and how to take care about our emotional well-being, physical well-being, mental well-being, and also various other social aspects of reproduction. So this whole chapter revolves around these issues of uh, concern, and basically this is quite an important chapter with respect to our well-being in general, right? So to start off with, in this particular chapter, we are trying to figure out some of the problems and the strategies that are there in this particular topic, which is the reproductive health. Then we talk about one important concept of something that we call as the birth control. Uh, Quite important because if the birth is not controlled, it leads to population explosion, right? So that part of the topic is being discussed. Then we also talk about if there is already pregnancy, can it be terminated? So, which we call as MTP, or medical termination of pregnancy before the fetus develops, right? So that would be another topic that we would discuss in this topic. Also, we talk about some of the diseases which are transmitted sexually, and then we also discuss about the infertility aspects. So these are some of the topics that we would discuss in this particular chapter. So over to the first one, which is talking about what is reproductive health. Then we'll also talk about some of the problems of uh, this particular topic and some of the strategies that we are employing uh, to solve this particular problems. India was one of the first few countries which started uh, to talk about reproductive health, and this was considered to be one of the social problem. Uh, Sometime in just after we got our independence, somewhere close to around 1950s, early 50s, there was a program which was called as the family planning program. Okay, this was this is there from almost 1950 and has been kind of a topic of discussion from a very long time. In fact, every few years the motto of this program changes, and also we talk about how the reproduction related areas, the problem of some of the aspects that come under this category are very well addressed. Okay, there is one such program which is called as the reproductive and child health care, okay, which is called as the RCH program. This is actually one of the programs taken by our government to give that general awareness about some of the aspects relating to the reproduction and some of the facilities, some of the support that the government offers to see that the society remains healthy by producing a healthy baby, which in turn goes to see that the mother is healthy. So it's basically, with a lot of care that many audio visual uh, clippings are being generated, and there is some kind of print media also that is involved to see that there is general awareness uh, related to reproduction and its aspects. And not only that, over a period of time, people have really understood the importance of giving mother, would be mother, lot of nutrition, taking good care, physical care, mental care, as well as the emotional care. So this is one aspect which the government has done. And not only this, it's also seen to it that in schools there is a right kind of education about the reproductive health. So they kind of learn about how important it is to have a good hygiene, good health. They also talk about various sex education, which helps the child to overcome some of the myths and misconceptions. At the same time, they also kind of get to know more about themselves, some of the changes that's happening inside them, something that's related to adolescence, or some of the practices that they would follow, something about the sexually transmitted diseases, AIDS, and so on. So this is what is our government doing. Along with that, there is one more stream which actually helps to educate people, where there are some kind of counselors who kind of uh, counsel couple who are married. They talk about some of the best birth control options, or how to take care of the pregnant mothers, and after the birth, how to take care of the mother as well as the child, the type of nutrition that is required, what is the importance of breastfeeding. Okay. And yeah, one thing that they generally focus on is something that the gender equality, whether it's a boy or a girl child, they should be considered as same, and so on. Also, we have a lot of serials that I would say in TV, along with many other documentaries, which talks about social evils, uh, like there might be some kind of sex related crimes or sex abuse, and all this is kind of shown as a crime itself, which makes people which kind of makes people afraid of that, and would make them stop continuing them, if at all, right? So this is what is being done by the government. One more important breakthrough by our government is that across India there is a ban on one test, and the test is what we call as amniocentesis. uh, Amniocentesis is basically a test where they take the amniotic fluid from the surrounding of the embryo. Okay. Now, if we take this amniocentesis, if you are doing this test, you get the cells of the fetus basically, and in fact, you can actually find out the sex of the embryo. But actually we have banned that in our country, and hence we will not get to know what is the sex of the fetus. Okay. But however, amniocentesis is being done for various other purposes. Suppose parents have some kind of genetic condition where they can lead to, where there can be some kind of congenital diseases, they can all be detected by amniocentesis. But in our country, we have banned amniocentesis for fetal sex determination, right? So that is completely banned. Also, our government has come up with something that we call as massive child immunization. It's a program where most of the kids most of the infants born are given immunization to see that they remain healthy for a longer time. Uh, Also, it is our government is kind of funding some of the research agencies um, like CDRI. CDRI stands for Central Drug Research Institute. Okay, now this institute is there are many such institutes for that matter, is completely involved in trying to come up with some kind of drug which can be taken both by men and women to see that there is no ovulation or there is no spermatogenesis, so on and so forth, just to see that population is checked. At the same time, if the mother decides not to have child, yes, she can go for this kind of pills. Also, CDRI works on postnatal care as well. So this way, our government has taken up various health problems and has come up with various strategies to see that the overall reproductive health of the society is well maintained, right? Once the government decides to do something in this regard, finally it's all up to every individual and every citizen to take it with the right spirit, and that leads to responsibility on everybody's shoulder to see that the vision of the country is uh, you know uh, succeeding. At the same time, their personal you know requirements are also met. So in this regard, we see that there are good number of birth control measures that are being carried out, which kind of helps in maintaining or controlling the population explosion. Uh, just to give you one of the most important statistics here. Long time back, a long time back would be somewhere around 200 years back, there would be only around 20% of the population that were born who would see their puberty, they would see their uh, growth. The rest of them would die because of one or the other infections. Also, mothers would die a lot during childbirth, and all this would happen because our system, okay, our medical system or our knowledge about medical sciences was kind of quite limited. There was very high maternal mortality rate, there was very high infant mortality rate, and therefore you see that giving birth was really a huge scenario where uh, no one would predict about what would happen after the birth, because the child as well as the mother were at very high risk. But because of advancement in our technology, because of wonderful programs taken up by the government like RCH program, we see that the maternal mortality rate as well as the infant mortality rate has come down drastically. In fact, it has come down so low that now the overall average human population has gone up to a lot. Okay, uh, all this is possible because of the advancement in the medical sciences. But let us look at the other scenario that this would cause. If this keeps on continuing like this, right, you see that there would be absolute scarcity for food, for shelter, for clothing, and here we are still yet to make a lot of progress. Right now, it was because of this that there had to be some measures for birth control so that there is no population explosion. And I think it was during one of these times that the government came up with something, some kind of contraceptive methods. Okay, so they started telling something like, hum do, hamare do, and we two ours one, and things like that, where for every couple there would be one child or max two children. So that was what was being done. All this just to see that the population explosion is under check. Okay. In fact, when we are talking about this, I would always think about China. China government was very strict about it, saying that there can be only one child per couple. Uh, yeah, maybe in our live class we will discuss, how good it is to have that kind of definite rules, because right now they have seen that China's population, majority of them are old, and youth are very less. And what would happen in another 20 to 30 years? It's going to be a huge difference that would be in the country, right? So let us have that kind of discussion for our live class. But as of now, our government is also not very strict though, but yeah, it has some kind of birth control measures that it would always it would always try to kind of uh, tell it to everyone and make it famous. Okay, now such methods which does not allow the fertilization to happen, we call them as the contraceptive. Okay, we call them as the contraceptive, and these contraceptives are being popularized by the government. So generally, a contraceptive should be user friendly, easily available. It should be very effective, and should be reversible. If at all a couple decides to have one more child, they should be able to go back. And then the most important one is that it should not have any side effects. Okay, so we also see that this contraceptives consumption should not change the sexual drive or the desire, or the sexual act of the user, and thus choosing the right contraceptive is something which is very, very important. Now all the contraceptives that are available in the market can be divided into different categories. Okay, so we have the first type of contraceptive, which is called as a natural contraceptive, or a traditional contraceptive. Then we have one more type of contraceptive which is called as the barrier. Then we have certain devices that can be put in the uterus, which are called as intrauterine devices. Then there are something that we call them as some kind of pills, which are called as the oral, which are called as the oral contraceptives. These are also called as injectables. There can be oral contraceptive pills, or injectables, or there can be implants, and then there can also be some kind of surgical methods. So there are many types of birth control which are right now available in the market. So let's see about each one of them. So the first one is a natural method, considered to be the best uh, because there is zero side effect. Okay, so what they do here is condition where there is no chance of the ovum meeting the sperms, and that can be done by just not having any sexual intercourse during the period of ovulation, which happens to be sometime between 10 to 17 day of the menstrual cycle. So this is one way of a natural method which is called as the periodic abstinence. Uh, there is one more which is called as the withdrawal, where the male partner would withdraw uh, before the ejaculation of the semen, and this also will prevent insemination. So this is one more natural method of uh, contraceptive. The third one is something that we call as the lactational amenorrhea. Lactational amenorrhea is basically, it is observation when the mother is feeding the child, okay, with the breast milk. Generally, there is no menstruation, and it is at this period of intense lactation um, that there is no menstruation, which can be used as a contraception. Okay, so this is one more natural method of contraception. Yes, this is one of the best methods of contraception, mainly because all these are natural with zero side effects. But talking with regard to how good that would work, now that is slightly different. As we have seen that the menstrual cycle is completely dependent on various hormones, stress factors, and many more. We see that though there is abstinence that is being followed, there can be a slight chance of fertilization. Okay, so that is one major drawback of this process. But whatever said and done, this is something which is considered to be the best method of contraceptive. Uh, Going to the second one, which is called as the barrier. So here, the meeting of the sperm and the ovum is kind of stopped and prevented by use of certain physical method. Okay, uh, so this is available for both men and women. We call them as condoms, which are worn by generally the males, uh, which has basically a rubber sheath, a latex sheath, which does not allow the sperms to meet the ovum. So basically there is absolutely no meeting of the sperms with the ovum. Also, the use of the condoms is being completely popularized to uh, stop the spread of sexually contracted diseases like AIDS or syphilis. So these are very easy to use, user friendly, cheaper, um, and they are all kind of use and throw, disposable, and gives privacy to the user. So this is what is the barrier method. Also, it is seen that there is some kind of cervical caps or diaphragms that are used as barriers. Now, they all of them, they would have some kind of spermicidal creams. Spermicidal are the ones which would kill the sperms. So there is use of the spermicidal creams in this kind of barriers as well. So this is about the second one, which is the barrier. The third one is something that we call as the intrauterine devices. Now these are basically a very small devices which are put into the uterus. Okay, they are put through the vagina. These devices would go in the uterus and would be present in the uterus and would actually prevent in binding of or say implantation. It would prevent implantation. So that is the major way by which this would work. There is one very commonly used intrauterine devices which is called as the copper T. Copper T is basically a small T-shaped loop-like structure which is inserted into the uterus, and this copper T would release very small amount of copper into the uterus, and copper again sees to it that there is the cells, the sperms which are undergoing phagocytosis. Along with that, there are some intrauterine devices which produces hormones which will kill the sperms, or there might be some kind of intrauterine devices which increase the phagocytosis of sperms and so on. Okay, so this basically makes the uterus unsuitable for implantation, and uh, and the cervix as well, uh, and therefore the sperms just cannot survive in that environment. Okay, so this intrauterine devices obviously are for the females, and this is generally used for by the females who would want to delay their pregnancy, because this is completely reversible. So we take out the intrauterine device, we see that the rest of the things would work well again, and there can be implantation possible. So that is about the intrauterine devices. Then comes something that we call as the oral contraceptives. Oral contraceptives are basically a small pill that is taken, by the females. Now there would be hormones present in these pills, hormones like the progesterone, and increased amount of progesterone will always lead to the menstrual cycle. So what they do is they calculate it from the menstrual cycle, and after 7 days of menstrual cycle, 7 days of menstruation that's happened, they take progesterone pills, and these progesterone pills will avoid fertilization, right? So this is what would be done in the case of oral contraceptives, but yes, again this has its own drawbacks, because hormones are being taken, and hormones over a long period of time has its own side effects. um, the institute that I told you just now, the CDRI, is involved in coming up with one oral contraceptive pill which is called as Saheli. And this is to be taken once in a week to see that there is contraception that is happening. But yeah, how safe it is to be judged by the doctor. So this is one more method. Then there can be certain injections also that can be taken, like the progesterone hormones or the estrogen hormones can be taken as injections, or they can be taken as implants. Okay, if it is injection, the hormones are just used put in the body with an injection, and if it is an implant, there's a small chip-like thing which is put under the skin. Now these release the chips would release the hormones in a very slow and steady manner, and prevents conception. So this is one more method of uh, contraception. The most widely used is going for the last type of contraceptive method, which is called as sterilization, or which is also by the surgical method. Now in this particular process of sterilization, it can be done both on the males or the females, either of them or both of them. Generally it is either of them, where there is a terminal method to prevent any more pregnancies. Now this is a terminal method, and therefore the the reversal of this is a highly negative side. So it is just not reversible. So if the surgical procedure is done on a male, we call that as vasectomy. Okay, it's called as vasectomy because you see that in the case of the tube, which is the vas deferens is cut, and it is kind of plugged there. Therefore the sperms which are produced do not enter into the urethra, and then it does not come out, and therefore there is no you know mm, release of sperms at all. So that is the first method of surgical method, that is called as the vasectomy. Whereas in the case of females, there is one more type of uh, surgical operation that is done, which is called as tubectomy. Now in the case of tubectomy, the fallopian tube is cut. So we see that isthmus and ampulla junction, just after that we see that it is cut, and therefore the ovary is producing the eggs which does not reach the uterus at all. So this is another process by which one of the surgical methods called as the tubectomy, by which um, you know a good contraceptive can be used. Whatever said and done, we see that though there are so many types of contraception, uh, it is always good to ask the doctor, find out the method which is the best method to prevent pregnancy, and go with it for maintaining the reproductive health. Now, once we talk about the birth control, obviously, this helps to check the population explosion, and then it is always easier for us to uh, kind of take care of the health. However, not all this, except the surgical thing, not all of these are giving you 100% result. There is some kind of probability that leads to pregnancy. Now, if the pregnancy is undesired, or if we get to know that the baby is not growing well, or if we get to know due to pregnancy there might be a problem to the mother, then we can end the pregnancy. And that is what we call as the medical termination of pregnancy, which is also called as MTP. Now this termination is not happening by chance. Okay, generally we say that in implantation there is a slight higher chances of losing that fetus. Okay, but however after implantation losing the fetus is not easy. But however, if at all it is required, then we have to go for this process which is called as the medical termination of pregnancy. This is also called as induced abortions. Okay, you would be wondering that close to 50 million MTPs are being performed throughout the year, right? So it has a major role to control population explosion. Anyway, it's not legal to carry out MTP in many of the countries. However, in government of India, you see that it has legalized the MTP sometime in 1970s. Of course, with very strict conditions laid to it. We cannot have a sex determination done and go for MTP. That is not allowed. Checking the fetal sex is also crime, and aborting a girl child because it's a girl child, which we call as the female feticide, is also considered to be very bad. Now MTP is harmful for the mother. Okay, there is some kind of risk always associated, but if this risk is much better than continuing the pregnancy, then the doctor would always suggest to go for MTP. MTPs are considered to be very safe in the first trimester, Second trimesters abortions are riskier, not so good, mainly because the fetus is kind of grown, and you also see that it has developed organs and all of them. So there are a lot of ethical issues that are involved there, talking about there is already life in the fetus, so how can we kill life? That kind of ethical issues arise. So one has to be careful about it, uh, and has to take the right decision at the right time. However, the MTPs are not performed in the third trimester. It has to be done in the first and the second trimester. First trimester is safer, second trimester is dangerous for both the mother as well as for the fetus. But yeah, depending on various other conditions, continuing this is choosing this is something that has to be decided for. uh, One more important feature that has to be thought about is something that we call as the sexually transmitted diseases, uh, which are very commonly called as STD, or we also call them as venereal disease. So this is basically some kind of disease that happens in the reproductive system or the reproductive tract, and this might not be confined only for the reproductive system. It can kind of debilitate other uh, body parts as well. Some of the most commonly seen sexually transmitted diseases are syphilis. Then there is one more which is again quite common, which is called as gonorrhea. Uh, Gonorrhea. Then we have one more which is called as the genital herpes. We have the genital herpes. Then we have something that we call as uh, genital we have the genital warts. Then we have one more disease which is called as trichomoniasis, right? Then we have hepatitis B, and of course we forgot about the most deadly one, which is the AIDS caused by HIV. Now all these infections, uh, especially the AIDS and hepatitis B, all this, they spread by sharing injection needles, surgical instruments, blood transfusion from the infected mother to the fetus, and so on. But some of the diseases like genital herpes and all of them, they are generally happening and spread when there are multiple sex partners. Okay, therefore one has to have a very strict regimen about choosing the partner and uh, choosing the person with whom uh, they would want to sleep with. Also, you see that if these diseases like genital herpes, warts, and some of them, if they are detected earlier, you see that there is a complete chance to cure them, and if they are treated properly, of course. Uh, Whereas once they go to a higher level of infection, then treatment becomes difficult, and curing, whether it gets cured, becomes a big question mark. Okay. Now some of the symptoms for most of the diseases here, except AIDS of course, would be itching. Then there would be some kind of fluid discharge, slight pain, or you can have uh, some kind of swelling in the genetic region, genital region, and so on. So these are some of the things that would that has to be noted for. And also we do see that if at all any of these are there, they should not be neglected, that it has to be shown to the doctor immediately for curing the disease. Okay. So this is about some of the sexually transmitted diseases, and all this can be just prevented uh, by by avoiding sex with unknown partners, then use of condoms during intercourse, and any kind of symptom, we can go to doctor for early detection and complete treatment. Okay, so these are some of the important points for which we need to think of, and we should take care and see that uh, all these diseases can be prevented. Right now, the next topic for discussion under this chapter is about something that we call as infertility. Now, in the case of infertility, here due to some reason there is no zygote formed, or there might be no development of the zygote, or sometimes the developed zygote will not be able to get implanted into the uterus, or the implanted uterus might not get enough nutrition and might get aborted. Now, all these conditions would lead to the loss of the child, obviously, and therefore, and because all these processes happens inside a woman most of the time, a female is blamed for the couple being childless. Okay, but however, we should get to know that it's not always the woman that has to be blamed for, it can be men also. However, with wonderful advancement in the technology, we have something that we call as assisted reproductive technology, which is also called as ART, assisted reproductive technology. So here the couples are kind of assisted to have children. They will find out where the problem is, what the problem is, find out the right kind of treatment, right kind of cure for that, and kind of the whole the couple are assisted throughout the process. So that is called as assisted reproductive technology. Uh, Along with that, we have one more which is called as IVF. If by chance, because of some kind of problems, there is no fertilization happening, then the fertilization is happening in vitro. In vitro means inside the glass. So basically, the fertilization happens in a petri plate. Okay, so here we take out the egg, we take out the sperm, we fertilize it outside the body. So you see that the fertilization happens externally, and then after fusion there is zygote. The zygote is grown up to some level, the embryo is formed, and this embryo is again put in the mother uterus or any other female, and the baby is growing in the womb. So this kind of baby is called as a test tube baby colloquially, and kind of being used used for quite some time right now. Okay, so we have many different types of in vitro fertilization. We have one more which is called as ZIFT, zygote intrafallopian transfer. So here what they do, they take the zygote or the cells which are in the morula stage, and they are transferred back into the fallopian tube. This is done when the uterus is working proper, or sometimes we put the zygote into uterus itself. We call that as intrauterine transfer, so that from the morula it goes into the blastocyst, and then the implantation happens, so on and so forth. Okay, or sometimes we do see that there is something that we call as in vivo fertilization, which happens uh, where if fusion of gametes within the female body, where the transfer, where we are kind of assisting those females who cannot conceive. So we have various methods for carrying out in vitro fertilization. uh, Also, just because we're talking about a gift, I would like to talk about one more technique which is called as gift. Now here in gift, we are talking about the gamete intrafallopian transfer. Okay, yes, this is generally done by uh, the where we have the ovum collected from one donor. There is a formation of the zygote, and it is put into another female. That is generally done when the uterus is not developed well, or some kind of problem with respect to the uterus. So that is the problem that we see there. Okay, many times we also see that the sperms lack uh, motility, high motility. In such case, we go for another method which is called as ICSI, in ICSI, intracytoplasmic sperm injection. Now you know what they do here? They take the sperm and it is directly injected into the ovum. So there are many other methods of assisted reproductive techniques right now, and all this would be a part of artificial insemination technique. Okay, so we have many methods to have. Uh, we have to see that every couple has a child. Uh, but whatever said and done, all these methods require wonderful skills to manage everything inside the lab. Okay, it requires skilled professionals, then wow, huge instrumentation, and all of this. And right now, in Bangalore we have such good centers which are completely treating infertility. Also, we are all uh, human beings with logical brain and lot of heart. So we have our own boundaries of ethics and some of the rules that we laid on, and you see that we have our own boundaries for emotional, religious and social factors. And yes, though many of the educated people would go for these techniques, not all of them would want to, because there are their own methods of you know being skeptic about these methods, right? Also, if nothing works, there is our government which always talks about adoption, legal adoption, to have a wonderful parenthood. So this way, you see, we have a lot of aspects taken by our government to maintain the reproductive health. And as I was telling you, it becomes our individual responsibility as well, not only to maintain reproductive health, to maintain overall health for our own physical, mental, emotional, social, psychological well-being, right? So with this, we complete one unit on the reproductive system. So we spoke about why reproduction is important. We studied reproduction in flowering plants, human reproductive system, and also ended the unit by talking about having a very good reproductive health uh, as a social change. So with this, let me just end my class today. Any doubts, make a note of it. We will discuss it during our live class. See you till then. Bye.